येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मह्यम. Mets ta N voilà. Fais pitié d'appeler. Tu remplis ta main pour moi. Ok? Moi, j'ai qu'à boire. Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamaiham Gadati Sapatantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Sri Gurung Vaisnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tang Sachivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sivishakhan Vitam Muscha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shanyavadi Paschata Deshatarine Joyasi Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Shri Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. So what did we conclude? I'd like to hear from you, realizations, and sort of refresh our memory what we discussed yesterday. And because it is only yesterday, I'm sure that everyone remembers. Yes. Any points? Bring it up.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you very much for the opportunity you are giving us to learn from Bhagavatam. So,
yes.
Yeah, yesterday we concluded by discussing about the results, the fruits of having to hear the narration of Lord Varaha, is the transcendental activities, how he has rescued the Earth planet that was submerged. And then we also discussed that at the end of his Lord Varaha's activities, he kept the Mother Earth afloat on top of the ocean of Gaboda Kasai Ocean.
Okay.
So
yeah, we could not understand why didn't he put it in orbit.
Yes.
But then we were speculating intelligently that maybe that's the service of Lord Brahma.
Yeah.
Because how he creates a planetary systems, I had a long thought about it, how he creates a planetary systems based on the blueprint or the framework given by Garbhodakshaya Vishnu in the form of Vishwarupa or Virat Rupa. So he creates a 14 planetary systems, right? So where does he place the different planets? That's really up to him, but we have to find some extra information on this. And it's like, please do find some extra information on this. It would be nice. Maybe in Brahmavavata Puran, maybe in Brahma Puran, maybe in Vishnu Puran, some information will be there. I haven't had time to look into Laghu Bhagavatamrita. Yeah, but we can look also there. That's an interesting search. But otherwise, we are satisfied with what we learned.
Yeah.
Okay. And he sprinkled, Lord Varaha sprinkled. Anyone can talk about the water he sprinkled? Someone else? Rasavan.
Yes. It has been in my mind.
Varaha sprinkled water over the 3 planetary systems, and they felt purified. Which planetary systems were that, and where did the water come from? You remember? From the hairs on his body, just like a hog, just like a bull comes out of water. Water is all over the body of the bull. So when he's shaking, when he shakes the water, then the water, because it's gigantic form, the water is sprinkled over the Jana Maharata.
Yes.
And they felt purified because of that water. And the comparison was given that this water is exactly like the Ganges water, because it also touches the body of Lord Varaha. Anything else?
The planets, Jana, Tamas, and Satyaloka. Those are the 3 higher planets.
Yeah. So because of that, Madhuvan Prabhu, we can conclude is that this was a devastation at the end of Brahma's night, at the end of Brahma's day. Because the upper planetary systems were there.
Yeah.
And from Swarga, Bhuvarlok, Swargalok, Bhuvarlok, and the lower planetary systems were destroyed.
Yeah.
And the 3 planetary systems are not destroyed. And the Brahma's planet is not destroyed because he's sleeping there.
Yeah.
And the other sages are also doing the seva and the meditation. So that we can conclude. Okay. So
We also learned of the Sambada Jyan, Abideya, and then the Prayudhyan.
yes.
Which are
yes.
Sambada Jyan, taking that into the relationship with the Lord, and then the superintendent deity is Radha Madana Mohan. And then the Abideya, consisting of our activities to please the Lord. And then the superintendent deity is Radha Govinda Ji. And the Prayodhyan, which is the ultimate goal of life, attaining the lotus feet of the Lord. And then the superintendent deity is Radha Gopinath.
Yes. Yes. Right. And that was in relationship to the text 37, the repeated Diksha, sacrifice or initiation. The repeated appearance of the Lord was like repeated Diksha initiation. Yeah. And we talked about if a devotee is not able after Diksha to perfect his life, then he will be again born as a devotee and he will not remember that he has taken Diksha. So his eternal spiritual master will come personally or send a representative, and he might be reinitiated. So these repeated appearances of the Lord represents that repeated Diksha initiation. Interesting. Because he is a Lord of sacrifice. He's the Lord of sacrifice. So that's a very interesting point. Okay, and then the Lord came out holding the Mother Earth on his tusks, right? And then Mother Earth became his
wife.
His wife. Very good. Okay. So, and then the Lord placed Mother Earth on the surface, and by his touch, then naturally Mother Earth, he becomes the father of the Jivas. Yes, go on. No. And what was the Falashruti, or the Falashruti? What was the result of hearing the pastimes of Lord Varaha? that we attain the good fortune of his lotus feet by hearing these pastimes. Yeah, and also there's a Satya Sankalpa of Lord Varaha, which is very unique, which is called a promise. Just like there's a promise that Krishna makes to the devotees in Bhagavad Gita. There's a solemn promise he makes, which is, what is that promise? (1866).
Savadama Parityaja.
Yeah, that's a solemn promise.
Yes, Mamikam Stranambaja.
Aham tam sarva apebhyo mokshaysami ma. Do not fear. Do not fear. If you surrender to me, I will free you from all your
sinful reactions.
Sinful reactions. That's a very powerful statement. So that's a solemn promise. And Lord Ramachandra gave a solemn promise. His solemn promise is, whoever takes shelter of me, whoever comes to my side or takes shelter of me, or come to my camp, no matter what, I will never forget, and I will always accept him, no matter who he is. And he made that when Vibhishan crossed over. When Vibhishan crossed over from
the ocean of material misery.
Yeah, from Ravana to his side. And his company, his side, his Vanara Sena, his monkey warriors saying, no, his enemy, don't trust him. He said, no, if someone comes to surrender, I have to accept. This is a second solemn promise. Now there's a solemn promise that Lord Varaha says. Lord Varaha gives a very incredible solemn promise. And he says that if someone worships me in his young age, and if somehow by the effect of time and by the effect of old age, he forgets me, I will not forget him at the time of death. That's what Lord Varaha's promise is. Are you able to understand what I've just said? Or it seems like maybe you have a problem with the sound, or you're struggling? No?
I think I can understand what you are saying, Prabhu.
Yeah. Everyone else can hear? Sharika, can you hear?
I'm hearing you, Prabhu.
Prabhuji, we can hear very well.
You can hear me very well. Okay, you did not. Thank you. All right. So those three things we conclude this chapter. Now we start with chapter 14 today. Okay. So this chapter 14 is entitled Pregnancy of Deity in the Evening. So okay, we start now. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Cheva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudhiraya. Nasta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Grantharada Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. So, chapter 14, Pregnancy of Deity in the Evening, and this text 1. Sri Shuka Uvacha Nishamya Kaushara Vinupavarnitam Harer Katham Karna Sukharatmanah Punacha Praprajatam Udhyanta Jali Natcha Titripto Viduro Dritobrata. Sukadeva Goswami said, after hearing from the great sage Maitreya, and the Lord's incarnation as Varaha. Vidura, who had taken a vow, begging him with folded hands to please narrate further transcendental activities of the Lord, since he, Vidura, did not yet feel satisfied. Vidura Uvacha. Okay, so Shukadev Goswami is saying here, after hearing from the great sage Maitreya about the Lord's incarnation as Varaha, Vidura begged him with folded hands to please narrate further transcendental activities. So Vidura was enjoying the nectar of the narrations of the Supreme Lord's Leela, and with folded hands, he begged Maitreya Rishi. He said, please tell me more, tell me more. And what did Vidura inquire about? And that is in text 2. So these, I did make a comment about this, and I would humbly suggest devotees to make an extra effort when you're hearing these things, to make a note. Like, for example, in this chapter here, right from the beginning, the Shukadev Goswami opens up the chapter. But then he immediately goes and starts narrating Vidura's question to Maitreya. So these are Sangati verses. These verses been added by Vyasadeva to give context to the whole way that the parampara is sending this information down to us. So sometimes I think it's very important to get the structure a little bit in our mind, rather than just the philosophy all laid out, but without any structure. It has a structure here. Okay. So prior to that, say for example, if you look at text, if you look at the subject matter we just studied in text 13, in the last part, it is Maitreya Rishi who is saying. Okay, Maitreya Rishi is saying about the blessings that we get. And then in the end, Sukadeva Goswami, he concludes. So it lays a little bit of emphasis on this, okay? So sometimes you have to know that it is a dialogue within a dialogue, and it goes on and on for a long period of time sometimes. And we will see that this Maitreya Vidura Samvad is the longest Samvad, it's the longest discussion. Okay? So it's going on for a long period of time, and so much explanation is there. So now, Vidura is saying, O chief among the great sages, I have heard by disciplic succession that Hiranyaksha, the original demon, was slain by the same form of sacrifice the personality of Godhead Lord bore. Right? So that question is interesting. That Hiranyaksha, the original demon, was slain by the same form of sacrifices, which is the form of Lord Varaha. Okay. Purport. As referred to previously, the boar incarnation was manifested in 2 millenniums, namely Swayambhuva and Chakshusha. In both millennium, there was a boar incarnation of the Lord, but in the Swayambhuva millennium, he lifted the earth from within the water of the universe. Right? Whereas in Chakshusha millennium, he killed the first demon, Hiranyaksha. So in the Swayambhuva millennium, he assumed the color white, and in the Chakshusha millennium, he assumed the color red. Okay, so okay, it's good. Now get everyone's ears pricked up. So Vidura had already heard about one of them, and he proposed to hear about the other. So the 2 different boar incarnations described are the one Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay, so Prabhupada in the purport talks about the red. So I will just go back to our parampara and look at this text here and see what Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has to say. So Text 2. Okay. It should be understood that in Swayambhuva Manvantara, Varaha lifted the earth. And in Chakshusha Manvantara, Varaha killed Hiranyaksha. So it's two pastimes, same as it is said here. Prabhupada has given the same information. So we will go back to our purport here. So when we say here, Vidura had already heard about one of them. Which pastime so far has Vidura heard about?
Chakshusha incarnation.
No. It's Swayambhuva. Swayambhuva. Remember the context was Swayambhuva. Manu was requested by Lord Brahma to create the population. He said that the earth is down at the bottom of the Garbhodak ocean.
Yeah.
So that's a Swayambhuva Manvantara.
Okay, Swayambhuva.
Right. Yeah. That's in the Swayambhuva Manvantara, right at the beginning. And then now he assumed the color white. And in the Chakshusha millennium, he assumed the color red. Now Vidura had heard about one of them, which is the Swayambhuva one, which just that had been narrated.
Yeah.
So he wanted to know more about what about the other one. So that's why he's asking this question, right? So he said that I have heard about Hiranyaksha being killed by Lord Varaha. So he's excited to know more, just like we all are a little bit excited here. So what was the reason, O Brahmana, for the fight between the demon king and Lord Bo, while the Lord was lifting the earth as his pastime? So the question can be construed as being misleading, because what was the reason of Brahmana for the fight between the demon king and the Lord Bo, while the Lord was lifting the earth as his pastimes? So far it is not mentioned whether the red bow in Chakshusha Manvantara was lifting the earth. It was the Sweta, the white bow in Swayambhuva Manvantara, that was lifting the earth. So his questions is kind of inferring that while lifting the earth, there was a fight between Lord Bo, Varahadev, and Hiranyaksha. So let us hear. Okay, so let us hear. Shraddadhanaya bhaktaya bruhita janma vishtaram rishena tripyati manaha param kautuhalam hine. My mind has become quite inquisitive, and therefore I am not satisfied with hearing the narrations of Lord's appearance. Therefore, please speak more and more to a devotee who is faithful. Okay? So text 5. Maitreya uvacha sadhu viratvaya prishtham avatara katham hare yatvam prichhami martyanam mrityupasha vishatanim. The great sage Maitreya said, O warrior, the inquiry made by you is just befitting a devotee because it concerns the incarnation of the Supreme Lord. He is a source of liberation from the chain of birth and death for all those who have otherwise destined to die. So this sage Maitreya, he addressed Vidura as a warrior, not only because Vidura belonged to the Kuru family, but because he was anxious to hear about the chivalrous activities of the Lord in his incarnations of Varaha and Nrsimha. Actually, we are all very much interested to hear about activities of chivalry and heroism, all types of heroism. And sometimes that's why most of the stories are stories of kings and queens. Because in the realm of the kings and queens, there's always bravery, chivalry, suspense, and climax. So most of the stories that are narrated in relationship to the pastimes of the Lord, all related to major kings and queens, for the simple reason that it makes for interesting reading. It makes for interesting hearing, right? Say, for example, if you hear about the story of a sage who goes into a forest and he meditates, and then what he undergoes in his internal existence, in his subtle plane, can be described. What else can you describe? He's in a cave all by himself, right? He's in a cave all by himself. So, for example, the story of Maharaj Bharat, when he actually retires, the story of his retirement to an ashram by a river becomes quite eventful because he gets attached to a deer. And then the whole scenario of his attachment to the deer and his glorification of the deer becomes an interesting subject matter. Otherwise, if we say, just like Dhritarashtra, he entered the forest under the guidance of Vidura with his wife, and then he meditated till his body burned to ashes and his wife died. End of the story. How exciting is that? Right? So why does Krishna, it's a very interesting context, why does Krishna talks to Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra? Because Arjuna was the highly reputable person. His fame and glory was spread throughout the universe. Even the demigods were always thinking and praising him, and his valor and his chivalry and his charitable status and his power as the most famous archer that ever existed. So therefore, when Krishna wants to talk to Arjuna, all the elite, all the sages, all the pandits, all the brahmanas, all those who could hear, wanted to hear. Right? So this was kind of the situation at that time. So here now there is a fight. So Vidura is being addressed as a Kshatriya, as a king, as a warrior. Why? Because warriors have interesting lives. And because he's a warrior, he's of that nature, he wants to know the chivalry and the conquest and the fight between Lord Varaha and the demon king, Hiranyaksha. So because the inquiries concern the Lord, they were perfectly befitting a devotee. I'm reading the purport again. A devotee has no taste for hearing anything mundane. There are many topics of mundane warfare, but the devotee is not inclined to hear them. The topics of the warfare in which the Lord engages do not concern the war of death, but the war against the chain of Maya, which obliges one to accept repeated birth and death. In other words, one who takes delight in hearing the war topics of the Lord is relieved from the chains of birth and death. Foolish people are suspicious of taking part in battle of Kurukshetra, not knowing that he is taking part in sure liberation for all those who are present on the battlefield. It is said that by Bhishmadev, that all those who were present on the battle of Kurukshetra attained their original spiritual existence after death. Why? Because of the presence of Lord Krishna. And the battle was something that Krishna desired. So, so to die one last time, rather than to be born again and again and again and die again and again and again, it's very much welcome. So that was real compassion of the Lord to organize a very violent slaughter of so many people, because then by their death, they were put out of the cycle of birth and death. So wasn't that a compassionate war? Yeah. So therefore, hearing the war topics of the Lord is as good as any other devotional service. So now text 6. Yayota napada putro muninang gitarai baka mrityor kritvai murdinam angrim aruroha pane padam. By hearing these topics from the sage Narada, the son of King Uttanapad Dhruva was enlightened regarding the personality of Godhead, and he ascended to the abode of the Lord, placing his feet over the head of death. So this story here is being narrated in the Vaivashvata Manvantara. This is being discussed in Vaivashvata Manvantara, in the Manvantara of the sun god. And prior to that, the incident that happened between Lord Varaha and Hiranyakashipu is Chakshusha Manvantara. Okay? So much before that, much before that, right at the beginning is Swayambhuva Manvantara. And Swayambhuva Manu's son was Priyavrata and Uttanapad. And Uttanapad's son is Dhruva. So that story of Dhruva Maharaj, having been initiated, went to the forest and attained pure love of God, was already known. So in this way, Prabhupada is putting in the purport and also in the verse, Vidura is saying, Maitreya is saying that by hearing these topics from sage Narada, for example, the son of King Uttanapad, Dhruva also was enlightened. So now Maitreya is asking to hear about these pastimes. So just to lay some context. So while quitting his body, Dhruva Maharaj, the son of King Uttanapad, was attended by personalities like Sunanda and others who received him in the kingdom of God. He left this world at an early age as a young boy, although he had attained the throne of his father and had several children of his own. As a young boy, although he had attained the throne of his father and had several children of his own, he had attained the throne of Uttanapad, which was a request he made to Lord Vishnu while approaching Lord Vishnu. And because he was due to quit this world, death was waiting for him. He did not care much for death. However, and even with his present body, he boarded the spiritual airplane and went directly to the planet of Vishnu because of his association with the great sage Narada. So he ascended straight away to the spiritual world because he was such an advanced Vaishnava. And Nanda and Sunanda came to get him with assistance of Vaikuntanath, Lord Vishnu. Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah, Prabhu, what I want to understand is, by hearing these topics from the sage, is it that Narada was relating the same story of Lord Varaha to Dhruva Maharaj? Which story did Narada related to?
Oh, I get your question. By hearing these topics from the sage Narada, these topics mean similar topics.
Okay.
Mean similar topics of the pastimes of the Lord. Okay.
Okay.
So text 7. Atra pitihasomam shuddho me varnita pura brahmana deva devena devana manuprichatam. This history of the fight between the Lord as a boar and the demon Hiranyaksha was heard by me in a year long ago, as it was described by the foremost of the demigods, Brahma, when he was questioned by the other sages. In the history of the fight between the Lord as a boar and the demon Hiranyaksha was heard by me in a year long in a year long ago, as it was described by the foremost of the demigod Brahma, when he was questioned by the other demigods. So Lord Brahma had spoken it, and he had heard about some time back directly from Lord Brahma. So Maitreya Rishi has heard about the pastimes of Lord Varaha and Hiranyaksha being killed by the mouth of Lord Brahma. And Maitreya, having heard this, now he is narrating it to his disciple Vidura. So now it starts the story from text 8. Ditir dakshayani shattar maricham kashyapam patim apatya kamam kama chakame sandhyayam shrit chayardita. Diti, the daughter of Daksha, being afflicted with sex desire, begged her husband Kashyapa, the son of Marichi, to have intercourse with her in the evening in order to beget a child. The sun was setting, and the sage was sitting in trance after offering oblations to the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu, whose tongue is a sacrificial fire. Fire is considered to be the tongue of the Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu. And oblations of grain and clarified butter offered to the fire are accepted by the Lord because the fire is considered to be his tongue. Okay, so now Ditiruvacha. So the
Prabhu,
narration, yes.
please, I want you to clarify me clearly about this in the earth, sinking to the bottom of the ocean during the Swayambhuva Manu. What happened? Because we knew that it was Hiranyaksha, the demon Hiranyaksha, who removed the earth out of his anger from the orbit to fall into the bottom of the ocean. Now we understand that happened in the Chashusha Manu Avatar. Now in the Swayambhuva Manu Avatar, where the earth is under the bottom of the ocean, what happened?
That's what we've talked about at least 3 times, I think, that there is a mixture of 2 different pastimes at 2 different times being overlapped.
Yeah.
And we draw a conclusion based on something from here added to something from there.
Yeah.
So let us carry on hearing now the real pastimes of the red boar, which is in the Chakshusha Manvantara, and if that comes up.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Right. So it's good you asked that question. Now we can watch and see.
Okay.
You can anticipate.
Yes.
Okay. So Eshamam tat krite vidwan kama ata sarashana dunoti dinam vikramya rambam iva matangadaha. In that place, the beautiful deity expressed a desire. O learned one, Cupid is taking his arrows and distressing him forcibly as a mad elephant traverses a banana tree. So Cupid was affecting the mind and the heart's desire of Diti. And she expressed that desire to her husband, Kashyapa. So he saw that Kashyapa was in trance, and she began to speak loudly, not attempting to attract him by bodily expressions. But she frankly said that her whole body was distressed by sex desire because of her husband's presence. Okay? Just as a banana tree is troubled by a mad elephant. So it was natural for her to agitate her husband when he was in trance, but she could not control. It was not natural for her. It was not nice thing to do, but she could not control her strong sexual appetite. So her sex desire was like a mad elephant. So let us see down what happened next. Therefore, you should be kind towards me. So Diti is approaching and speaking loudly. Kashyapa, he said, you should be kind towards me by showing me complete mercy. I desire to have sons, and I'm much distressed by seeing the opulence of my co-wives. By performing this act, you will become happy. So he's kind of giving blessings to Kashyapa, that if you fulfill my desires and let me have sons, then that will give you joy, because you satisfied your wife by giving sons. So Prabhupada talks about this desire for begetting children as being religious, righteous in the Gita. But in Diti's appeal to her husband, it was not exactly what she was afflicted, but she desired sons. Okay, so as she had no son, then she was afflicted from that desire. But then the acharyas talk that she was afflicted by that karma, a desire for enjoyment too. Therefore, Kashyapa was supposed to satisfy him, because it's being presented that she wants son. Right? So let us see. Text 12. A woman is honored in the world by benediction of her husband, and a husband like you will become famous by having children, because you are meant for the expansion of living entities. Because Kashyapa and Diti and Aditi, Kashyapa and Diti were the parents of demigods. That's why the demigods are sometimes called Aditya, because they were children of Aditi and Kashyapa. And Diti and Kashyapa created demons, and they're called Daitya. Aditya and Daityas. Okay, so Daityas come from Diti and Kashyapa. So he said that, it's your duty to procreate, because we are meant to expand the population. Okay, let's, you can just few points in the purport. That one should not become a father, or pitana sasyat, janina sasyat, gururna sasyat, and so on. That if one should not become a father, a mother, or a guru if one cannot liberate its dependent. Okay, so text 13. Pura pitano bhagavan daksho duhitri vatsalah kam vrinitta varam vatsa iti aprichatta na pritak. In days long ago, our father, the most opulent Daksha, who was affectionate to his daughters, asked each of us separately whom we would prefer to select as our husband. Okay? So she is narrating. Okay? About the opulent father Daksha being affectionate to his daughters, asked each of us separately whom we prefer to select as our husband. So in the purport, it appears from this verse that the free selection of a husband was allowed by the father, but not by free association. So sometimes people tend to think that Vedic culture is all like everything is controlled, but people have so much freedom, but not freedom in the wrong sense. The ladies were allowed to pick and choose who they wanted to marry. And if they had given their heart to someone, the parents were practically obliged to marry them. So the daughters were asked separately to submit their selection of a husband who was famous for his accent personality. But the ultimate choice depended on the father. So text 14. Our well-wisher father Daksha, after knowing our intentions, handed over 13 of his daughters unto you. And since then, we have all been faithful. So 13 daughters of Daksha were handed over to Kashyapa Muni, including Diti and Aditi. So generally the daughters were too shy to express their opinions before their father, but the father would accept the daughter's intentions through someone else. So the girls would not approach the father directly, but they approach through a third person, like a grandmother or grandchildren, and so on. They would express that desire that such and such of your daughter are actually given the heart to such and such persons. So Diti's other sisters, which included 12 other sisters. They all had children, and she had no issue, no children. So rightly, she made a claim to her husband. Text 15. Ataha me kuru kalyanam kamam kamalalochana artho pasharpanam bhuma amogham hi mahishayasi. O lotus-eyed one, kindly bless me by fulfilling my desire. When someone in distress approaches a great person, his plea should never go in vain. So she is trying to bring out the aspect of duty and charity in the heart of Kashyapa. Text 16. O hero, Vidura. So just suddenly you see that the narration is going on in here. And Maitreya is speaking about what's going on, what he has heard from Lord Brahma. And then he is adding in a verse addressing Vidura. So he says, O hero Vidura, Diti being thus afflicted by the contamination of lust, and therefore poor and talkative, was pacified by the son of Marichi in suitable words. And who was the son of Marichi? Kashyapa. Okay? So when a man or woman is afflicted by sex desire, it is understood as sinful contamination, because that desire that comes out is actually born out of some sinful acts that was committed in the past. So it's a very profound statement here. Right? But he did not have sufficient strength to refuse his wife, who was thus afflicted. He could have refused her with strong words, expressing impossibility, but he was not as spiritually strong as Vidura. Vidura is addressed here as hero because no one stronger self-control than a devotee of the Lord. So Kashyapa was not strong enough to refuse Diti of her demand. And in fact, Prabhupada is comparing it. Vidura was much more stronger personality, stronger devotee. Prabhupada is saying in the purport, it appears that Kashyapa was already inclined in that way with his wife. And because he was not a strong man, he tried to dissuade her only with pacifying words, like he was not strong enough with her. He wasn't strong enough. Now, why was that required? Because it was not the right time. It was not the right time, and we will understand that. Text 17. Eshateham vidyasyami priyam bhiru yadichasi tasya kamam naka kuryat siddhistaiva giri pitha. O afflicted one, I shall forthwith gratify whatever desire is dear to you. For who else but you is the source of the free perfections of liberations. So what does that mean? The free perfections of liberations are what? They are religiosity, dharma, artha, and kama. Right? So it is a very funny way of putting things. It is a very funny way of putting things. It actually just give me 1 minute, please. Can someone read the purport for me?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, go on, read.
The three perfections of liberations are religiosity, economic development, and sense gratification. For a condition so,
The wife is considered to be the source of liberation because she offers her service to the husband for his ultimate liberation. Conditional material existence is based on sense gratification. And if someone has the good fortune to get a good wife, he is helped by the wife in all respects. If one is disturbed in his conditional life, it becomes more and more entangled in material contamination. A faithful wife is supposed to cooperate with her husband in fulfilling all material desires, so he can then become comfortable and execute spiritual activities for the perfection of life. If, however, the husband is progressive in spiritual advancement, the wife undoubtedly shares in his activities, and thus both the wife and the husband profit in spiritual perfection. It is essential, therefore, that girls as well as boys be trained to discharge spiritual duties so that at the time of cooperation, both will be benefited. The training of the boy is brahmacharya, and the training of the girl is chastity. A faithful wife and spiritually trained brahmachari is a good combination for advancement of the human mission. Hare Krishna.
So this is explaining the principles of Purushartha. That is, the Purushartha means goals of human life. If human life doesn't have goals, then it's not considered human life. So technically there are 4 goals of human life, which is called Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. So at least some people have to have at least one goal based on religious principles. Then that is considered human life. So Dharma means religiosity. Artha means economic development. And Kama means enjoyment of facilities available in the material world by means of fruitive activities. Not just any gross, but based on the principles of sacrifice. And then finally, moksha, liberation. So if someone doesn't have any of these goals, then it's not considered human life. That's why it's called Purusha Artha, Purushartha, for being a Purusha, a human. These are important points. So in terms of conditional material life, there's some sense gratification, which is religiously or spiritually or socially, or it's controlled. And within the confines of the Grihastha ashram here, there are some rules to be followed between Kashyapa and Diti, which means that she helps him towards liberation by providing him service and also able to develop economic advancement and some sense gratification in the confines of the Grihastha ashram. That's what he said here. Continual material existence is based on sense gratification. And if someone has a good fortune to get a good wife, he is helped by the wife in all respects. Right? So that's why the wife is considered to be Dharma Patni, religious partner, or religious wife. Because the idea is, if you are following Purushartha, then that is necessary. So a faithful wife is supposed to cooperate with the husband in fulfilling all material desires so that he can become comfortable and execute spiritual activities. So what does that mean here? What does that mean here? Anyone? It means regulated sense gratifications within religious principles. It's not that in the family they're not allowed to have good food or wear nice clothes or own something or engage in man-woman relationship, but has to be done for religious purpose. That's what it means here. If they have means, they can live nicely and comfortably. It's not that Krishna doesn't want his devotees to live comfortably with money, with facilities. No, it's not quite like that. And you will see that later on, Krishna gives blessings both. For example, to Dhruva Maharaj, he said, no, I want you to live comfortably. I want you to live a very nice, opulent life. And at the end also achieve. And he gave the same blessings to the Prachetas. So you live a nice, comfortable life, and then in the end, you will not forget me either. So this idea that depending on circumstances, obviously, that Krishna only wants us to live like a pauper and a beggar, it's not quite the idea that Krishna has in mind. Sometimes more spiritually advanced also sometimes means, depending on your ashram, more opulence. But all can be used in Krishna's service. Like Swambhuva Manu was extremely opulent. He was a pure devotee of the Lord. He's a Mahajan. But he was extremely well endowed with so much facility. He was the emperor of the universe. He was a Manvantara. He was a Manu of the universe. But he had so much facility too. But he was highly regulated and religious person. So some points to note on here. Okay? So text 18. As one can cross over the ocean with seagoing vessels, one can cross the dangerous situation of the material ocean by living with a wife. So she becomes like a help, a support. And she helps to cross over the ocean of material existence. So these are very interesting points. So someone can read the purport.
Okay, let me take it. There are 4 social orders for cooperation in the endeavor for liberation from material existence. The orders of brahmacharya, or pious student life, household life with a wife, retired life, and renounced life all depend for successful advancement on the householder who lives with a wife. This cooperation is essential for the proper functioning of the institution of the 4 social orders and the 4 spiritual orders of life. This Vedic Varnashram system is generally known as the caste system. The man who lives with a wife has a great responsibility in maintaining the members of the other social orders. The brahmacharis, vanaprasthas, and sannyasis. Except for the grihastha or the householder, everyone is supposed to engage in the spiritual advancements of life. And therefore, the brahmachari, the vanaprastha, and sannyas have very little time to earn a livelihood, grihasthas, and thus they secure the bare necessities of life and cultivate spiritual understanding. By helping the other 3 sections of society cultivate spiritual values, the householder also makes advancement in spiritual life. Ultimately, every member of society automatically becomes spiritually advanced and easily crosses the ocean of nations. Hare Krishna.
Okay, Hare Krishna. So any questions?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yeah, from this purpose, it's like the principles that govern the Grihastha might not be exactly the same that governs the other in the social status
Order.
by the brahmachari, the and the science. And then their responsibilities too are different. So he explained that the brahmachari, the vanaprastha, they don't have enough time to hand their own livelihood. So they have to be dependent on the grihastha. But now grihastha is also burdened by its family responsibilities also.
Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, you see, the situation is very simple in a way, but it's also because the grihasthas engage in economic activities. The brahmacharis don't, the vanaprasthas don't, and the sannyasis don't. So they don't engage in economic activities, so therefore they have nothing to give. So, but everyone has to be maintained. So the brahmacharis and the vanaprasthis and the sannyasis, therefore, they're maintained by that economic group, which is the grihasthas who are meant to earn a livelihood. And because they are grihasthas, they have family, then they have to maintain, right? So they don't have much time in the other ashrams.
Yeah.
That's why that because the dependence of the other ashram for maintenance is on the grihastha ashram, it sometimes feels very exploitative. That whether it is direct earning of money by brahmacharis, vanaprasthas, and sannyasis, or indirect earning of money, the money is coming from the economic group, which is generally powered by the grihasthas, by the householders and the business communities and those who are working. And therefore to live more opulently, than grihasthas is literally a sin, because that money is money of charity. So that's why he said here, except for the grihasthas or the householders, everyone is supposed to be engaged in spiritual advancement of life. And therefore, the brahmacharis, vanaprasthas, and sannyasis have very little time to earn a livelihood. So therefore, they collect alms from the grihasthas to secure the bare necessities of life. So they have to live a simpler life of abstinence, of austerity, of purity, of chastity, of obedience, of cleanliness, and not have much to do with economic activities or social activities. So by helping the other three sections of society cultivate spiritual life, the householders also makes advancement in spiritual life.
Okay.
Right? So finally, the brahmachari also, he's born out of the grihastha ashram. The sannyasi who takes sannyas, he was also born in the grihastha ashram. So the grihastha ashram is like the fountain source of all different ashrams. Right? They are created by the Lord, but then every individual issues from the grihastha ashram. And they are maintained by the grihastha ashram or the householder community or the householder people at the end. So therefore, it's imperative that they actually don't spend time doing other things except that cultivating spiritual life. And this way, everyone can become advanced. Okay, so text 19. O respectful one, a wife is so helpful that she is called the better half of a man's body because of her sharing in all auspicious activities. A man can move without anxiety and trusting all responsibilities to his wife. So generally, the home is managed by the wife. Okay, all homely affairs are managed by the wife under the careful, watchful eye of the husband, naturally. But she's given so much freedom in the home to manage everything properly. And therefore, the man, it doesn't have anxiety and he can move freely because he has other responsibilities. So sometimes we are thinking that the woman is not given freedom. No, the woman is given freedom. She can manage the home, manage the life, the education of the children, the cleanliness of the home, the cooking, the serving, the everything. Everything. So this is such an important point. And consider the better half of a man's body, because she's supposed to be responsible for discharging half of the duties of the husband. Right? So it's not that women who don't go to work don't have activities and service. They do have very interesting activities and service. Okay? So a family has a responsibility to perform 5 kinds of yajna, which is called the pancha yajna, in order to get relief from all kinds of unavoidable sin occurred in the course of his affairs. So the pancha yajna is because of the pancha suna, the 5 types of killing that is done inadvertently and which is unavoidable. When we cook, when we clean, when we brush, when we grind, and when we walk or clean anything in water and so on. There are 5 types of killing, pancha shuna. So pancha yajna is supposed to be performed as a family man. And by performing this pancha yajna, actually we get relief from, of course, in the Kali Yuga, we chant the holy name of Krishna as a pancha yajna. Okay, so when a man becomes qualitatively like cats and dogs, he forgets his duties in cultivating spiritual life, and he accepts his wife as a sense gratificatory agency. But when the wife is accepted as a sense gratificatory agency, then personal beauty becomes main consideration. And as soon as there's a break in personal sense gratification, there is destruction or divorce. So it is not based on duty, it is not based on reciprocation of higher ideals, that we are meant to go forward together and come out the other end, purified of desire for material life and material enjoyment, and make advancement like that. But when this vision is not there, in the West, the vision is not so much there. Now this nasty vision of liberated wife, liberated woman is taken on the rest of the world, even in India and other places. And what it is doing actually is destroying everyone's chances to go back home, back to Godhead. So Arjuna very rightly said in the beginning, 2nd chapter of the Gita, what did he say? He says, Adharma vibhat Krishna pradushanti kulastya. He said, when the women in the community becomes unprotected, then there is havoc. And he was right. So here it is the same thing is considered. In material world, there's a consideration of sense gratification, beauty, and this and that. There's no spiritual advancement, and there's no mutual cooperation for spiritual advancement. And therefore, when people's senses are not satisfied, then there's divorce. The wife wants to go one way, the husband wants to go one way, or one of them pull the other way, and the sacred religious duties are neglected, and the responsibilities are broken, and therefore, they become like cats and dogs. Okay, so text 20. Jayam ashityandra yaratam durjayan itarashramai vayam jayema helabhir dayan durga patiryatha. As a fort commander very easily conquers invading plunderers. By taking shelter of a wife, one can conquer the senses, which are unconquerable in the other spiritual orders. So the senses are unconquerable in the other spiritual orders. Means that the other spiritual orders, the senses have to be completely protected, and they cannot be conquered. But in the Ashram, the senses can be conquered. But then the commander-in-chief is a wife. Quite interesting. So by taking shelter of a wife, one is able to conquer the senses. So in this very nice purport, Prabhupada is talking about the 4 orders of human society: brahmachari, vanaprastha, grihastha, and sannyas. Okay, and the wife is supposed to be a commander of the fort, and therefore, whenever there's an attack on the body or by the senses, the wife who protects the body from being smashed. So Prabhupada is saying the sex demand is inevitable for everyone, but one who has a fixed wife is saved from the onslaught of the sense enemies. A man who possesses a good wife does not create the disturbance of society by disrupting virgin girls. Without a fixed wife, man becomes a debauchee of the first order and is a nuisance to society, unless he is trained as a brahmachari, vanaprastha, or sannyas. So in an indirect way, Prabhupada is talking about regulated, relationship between man, woman in grihastha ashram. Okay, and there are also so many instances of fall down, even of great yogis like Vishwamitra. The grihastha is saved, however, because of his faithful wife. So sex life is a cause of material bondage, and therefore it is prohibited in the free ashrams and allowed only in grihastha ashram. And the grihastha is responsible for producing first quality brahmacharis, vanaprasthas, and sannyasis. So how is the grihastha not respected? Because if there is a first-class brahmachari or grihastha and sannyasi, they are the product of the good grihastha ashram. Very powerful statement. Okay, text. Any questions, comments?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, Madhuban.
Yeah, my comment is that generally in the Krishna conscious movement, we generally like to look down the grihastha. We generally look down on them because for many reasons. First of all, they don't have too much time to engage in the spiritual protocols because of the engagement in the economic development, business, so many other things. So generally in the movement, we tend to look down grihastha, and except maybe if they have money, I don't know. But that instinct is there. And I think it's not supposed to be like that, according to this explanation.
Yes, because we don't have people who are really properly trained, whether in the brahmachari ashram or vanaprastha or sannyasam. They're not properly trained. Because of the lack of training, then the community doesn't develop healthily. Education is a key. And education means actually really reading Srila Prabhupada books, scrutinizingly, properly. And when devotees study Srila Prabhupada books properly, scrutinizingly, and they go through some kind of a, interesting training, like, okay, you're having some training here in the, some classes in Srimad Bhagavatam. And you can see that so much is there in these classes. When you go through the purpose in the association of devotees, so much is there. Now if you go for 15 years or 10 years of study of Srimad Bhagavatam in a rigid, structured manner, that will mold your life. That will mold your life, and it will make you a person who has a high level of spiritual education. But we're not giving importance. We're giving importance to the books, but mostly lip service. But importance to the books also means studying the books. I was thinking about this in the last few days. A lot of devotees have come forward and asking me, why is it that we doesn't feel like we are in a community? We are a ragtag group of devotees practicing Krishna consciousness, but we don't feel that we are part of a family. We're not community. We are just the Hare Krishna group of devotees, right? Like, we come together on and off, and then we. But you see, because we don't belong to the same culture. Technically, we don't belong to the same culture, because the influence of our host culture from where we have grown up, it still has the most influence on our lives. We may adopt vegetarianism, we chant Hare Krishna, we may have foregone Christian thought process of initiation and so on, and we take to the process of Krishna consciousness. There's one thing about taking the process of Krishna consciousness and practicing its religious edicts and spiritual duties. But do we have a Krishna conscious culture? Culture is based on education. So when we don't have a proper culture, is based on education and upbringing. Both education and upbringing will mold a person's life up to the age of 15, 16, 17, 18, and then, they are formed in a certain way, they have a certain set of values. And those things, and the foundational principles of that education, is explained by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami. And they are the different angas of devotional service, and 5 being the main, which is chanting the holy name, residing in the holy place, worshipping the deity, studying Srimad Bhagavatam, and then associating with devotees. And these 5 foundational principles are actually the cultural basis of transformation of the human life in the Krishna consciousness movement. And it's supposed to be ingrained into our culture, into our thought process, right from young age. But these things are not there, not strongly there. They're coming to some superficial level. So we are a ragtag group of devotees who are practicing Krishna consciousness and taking to some of the principles of devotional service, and others just still anchored into our host culture. So therefore, we tend to have a lot of discord. We tend to have a lot of opposing views. We tend to have a lot of, because of the lack of culture. Why I'm addressing it like that? Because it's a general statement. And unless we address this lack of culture properly through education and upbringing, then we're going to suffer the consequences of the discord and discordancy and people thinking different ways, people talking one way and living the other way, talking one way and living, according to other principles. This is just common thing. So I think, I may be biased, but my understanding from Srila Prabhupada's teaching is that to create a cultural revolution, it comes from study and implementation of the instructions of Srimad Bhagavatam. And that's what Prabhupada said. Tadvag vishargo janataga viplavo yasmin pati sloka gunanuvadyapi namanyanantasya yashun kitanyad gayanti grinanti jayanti sadhava. He says that honest men, purified, when they hear the message of Srimad Bhagavatam, it brings about a transformation in the human civilization. So that means by the spiritual culture of hearing and chanting. So that spiritual culture is not ingrained in our society. Therefore, our Krishna conscious practice is sometimes deep, sometimes it's superficial. And depending on the conviction of philosophical conviction or cultural conviction of what we are doing is right or wrong. So if we bring our daughters and our sons to think in this way that it is being taught here by the instructions of Maitreya to Vidura, then they will think differently. And they have to be also sheltered, and they have to have their own culture. They have to be sheltered from materialistic culture. So ISKCON in our Krishna consciousness movement, I mean, we are dabbling with both things. We are dabbling and trying to see how we can influence a little bit over the Western culture, so that we can extract people from there into our way of thinking. But then at the same time, we don't have a cultural basis for them to be rooted into. So we only have a simple thought process, an intellectual, reconfiguration of people, but cultural values are not there. That's why it's harder in countries like America or Africa. It's a little bit easier with Hindu societies because we have a similar, not fully Krishna conscious culture, but we have a semblance of a Sanatani culture. So it's easier, while the culture in the West is harsh compared to what is expected. So you see that it is in Krishna, in the West, Krishna consciousness is kind of collapsing because it was built on thin air. It was built. I find I think a lot about this. I think when we discuss this philosophy together, and we think about our kids and our children, I didn't have a school to send them to. So you give them some Krishna conscious education at home, and then you send them to be educated for 12, 14, 15, 16, 17 years in a Karmi school. So what do you produce? You have to be cautious. You can produce someone who's schizophrenic. Because at home you're telling them one way, and in school they're being fed another way. You know how grave this is? This is very serious stuff. Shalika, you're not there? Your picture there. Okay. So this is the whole thing here is cultural. These are not spiritual principles. This is a way of life.
So, Prabhu, yeah, I think these points you are raising are very crucial and very practical pertaining to our area of existence. They are basically factual. Now, with those who have so-called embraced Krishna consciousness within such an environment, what do you think is the future of these devotees? We are in a totally mixed up situation. What is our hope of practicing Krishna consciousness? Let me call it so-called Krishna consciousness.
Hope is coming from Lord Chaitanya. He is merciful, he is kind. But if you want to have an enduring effect, we have to also depend on creating a structure. Our hope is that we can pray to Lord Chaitanya to give intelligence to all of us so that we can actually mold. I think a lot about most of what we learn in Srimad Bhagavatam, and then we see that it is in practice. Like some of you, or I don't know how many of you, were brahmacharis in the ashram, and I was a brahmachari in an ashram for over 12, 10 years. So when you're a brahmachari in an ashram, the ashram, if that ashram training was in Srimad Bhagavatam, I would be a different person today. My 12 years of brahmachari ashram training was no training. I was a brahmachari with an economic purpose. I was a brahmachari with an economic portfolio. Right? Whereas we are meant to be a brahmachari with an intellectual portfolio. We are meant to educate ourselves in the realms of Krishna consciousness. We are meant to learn, read, study, teach, become austere. But we held an economic portfolio. And the only reason we were encouraged to be brahmacharis is because then we are not burdened or hurdled by responsibilities of wife and kids, so that we can produce for the movement or for the temple. It is fine. It was required in those days. Yeah, I don't have it. I mean, those are the best years of my life. So I'm just reflecting, saying now, I'm just reflecting.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it was a bad thing. It's a good thing. It was just the way things were. But don't we now owe it ourselves to think in a different way? Don't we owe it to ourselves now and to the movement and to Srila Prabhupada that we create brahmachari ashrams and train them to be spiritual leaders, so then they can take spiritual positions and create communities with spiritual culture? Why aren't we still doing it now? That's my.
Yes, it's
That's one thing is those who join at crossroads. We join at crossroads, and then, we are young. So when we join, we are at crossroads. We don't know, maybe I want to get married, maybe I want to do business, maybe I want to go to college. Oh, there's another option. Maybe I can become a monk. So I become a monk. But then when you become a monk, you're supposed to be trained in the monkhood. So if we can capture intelligent young men who are interested in monkhood, then you train them as a monk, then they become spiritual leaders. And because if you have strong, powerful brahmanas, then you will have Brahminical culture established. But if those who are aspiring for monkhood get trained for economic purposes or for Kshatriya purposes of management, then that is actually complete waste of life. So if now I can give you one powerful example. I can give you one powerful example now, and I think be hard for any one of us to refute it. There's a handful of very powerful spiritual leaders who is guiding and leading society in Krishna consciousness, and those are the brahmacharis that came out of Chaupati, because they spent 15 years in monkhood. They spent 15 years waking up early, living a austere life, studying 5-6 hours Shastra every day, doing Brahminical duties, doing spiritual duties, and learning to be obedient and learn. And they were protected and they were provided. But look at them now. They're matured and they've taken leadership position. And a very, very, very senior Prabhupada disciple listened to their classes because they were trained. They were trained. And their leader, the spiritual person in charge there, he separated their duties. He told them, your brahmacharis, train yourself. Train. And grihasthas, you also train, but at home, and provide. And they were respected. Grihasthas were respected. And the grihasthas respected the brahmacharis. That's what it is being talked about in this purport here. So I think that's a solution forward. And I'm going to hold that view till the day I die. And you're going to make me change that view, because I've lived both lives. I've lived the life of a brahmachari in an ashram. I've lived the life of a grihastha. And I'm living the life of a Vanaprastha teacher. And I'm speaking from practical experience. Had I been trained for the first 10 years of my life to study Bhagavatam, I would have been a different man. So it would be, okay, Krishna wants it like that. My spiritual master wanted it like that. That's fine. I agree with it. But we have to offer these options. So this is what we were talking about, building a culture. I'm only saying it from one angle. I don't know the rest of it. Only from one angle. Building a culture is based on education. You cannot have a culture that's not based in education. I was just recently reading some very interesting propositions from India, history of India. Actually, India had in many states, they had universities. Not just Takshashila and Nalanda, there was Vikramaditya, there is so many. Pranagiri, there were so many universities. And they had gurukuls in different places. So why the culture survived, and even after the onslaught of the Mughal invasion and the onslaught of the economic thieves and robbers from Britain, even then the culture of India mostly survived, is because of very profound, deep cultural roots. So we have to give these cultural roots to Krishna consciousness. This is not a pep talk. This is based on this here. You can expect your daughters to live like Diti, and your boys to live like Kashyapa. This is a culture, no? And what is the basis of human civilization? It's man and woman relationship. It's that, because they produce and Prabhupada here, the Grihastha is responsible for producing first quality brahmacharis, vanaprastha, and sannyasis. That's what the statement is. So if the Grihastha is not trained and the wife is not trained, then how do they produce first quality brahmacharis and vanaprastha and sannyasis? And if the seed, the science that's coming out of the Grihastha ashram is a good quality science, a good quality seed of a brahmachari, and then he's trained, he becomes a spiritual leader. Right?
Yeah. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, Chitra.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this. And this one, as you are saying, is a very big concern in the West here, and also in Africa, part over here. As we were saying, this is most of our challenge, and me particularly, right from I was born in Krishna consciousness, and this is one of my big challenge, trouble for we the children, the children and the youth, because we are born into Krishna consciousness, but we went to a karmic school, and what they teach from there is different from what we are being taught at home. Now we have the idea of having Krishna consciousness schools from infancy, but there is also not security. At the end of the day, we are thrown into the hands of Maya again at our senior high schools, where it is the most dangerous part. And this is not affecting only Krishna consciousness. We can see that from our Muslim sister religion, they have also seen the same thing. So now, let me say in Ghana or in some of West Africa, the Muslims give their children what we call makalanta, the infancy training in the home. But they have seen that at the second high school, they are thrown into the hands of typical serious Maya, that because then the children are in their teenage and puberty right stage. And that is where the influence is very high. So because of that, the Muslims are protecting their both Muslim senior high school for their children. So at that stage, between from 12 or the teenage to the 20 age, the child has passed those influence, which is the most terrible influence. But now we are not burdened that to save their children. So most of my colleagues who are born in Krishna consciousness and some of the children nowadays, this is the major problem that is affecting the children. Some of them.
I get you.
The children went to school.
Going too fast. Okay, Chitra.
And they have.
Yeah, you're breaking. We are missing you. So just stop for a minute.
I think the point is made.
Yes,
I think Chitra Prabhu, the point is made. It's very nice. I'm happy to hear your heartfelt feelings, and the solution is in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Oh, we lost him.
You can respond, Prabhu. It will be on record, so you will listen to it later on. But I also have been battling with my network. I have to change the network now.
Are you battling with your network, or are you battling with the modes?
Yeah, because I'm under
or the network is battling with the modes. Okay,
I'm
Chitra.
also under the influence of the
We
both.
are having the same
Chitra,
challenges today.
Chitra, listen to me, Chitra. I got the point. I got the point.
Yes.
Because you were breaking on and off, you're coming in and out.
My network have been very bad since yesterday over and today over here. The network is very bad for me.
So
Yes.
just to make a comment on your very interesting point you made is what is a guru? How do we educate our kids? In a gurukul. What is a gurukul? A gurukul is run by a couple, mostly vanaprashta or grihastha couple, mature grihastha couple. That's a gurukul. When Lord Krishna went to Sandipani Muni school, and there was time for asking a dakshina, right? Then said, what dakshina are you going to ask? When he's such an illustrious son, he's such a great disciple of yours. Who said that? His wife said to Sandipani Muni. So when are you going to ask some small thing? Ask him to get your son back.
Yes.
Yeah, but there's an example of established grihastha couple runs gurukul.
Yes.
So what we do is, I've had this discussion with some of my teachers and some of my friends, is this is the way it's going to be done, is you have to have couples and families running gurukuls together so that the cultural values are properly taught to the brahmacharis. Respect for the mother is taught, both in the school and at home. You cannot, so it's like these things are there. When you see in the Vedic system, sannyasis don't teach, brahmacharis don't teach. Grihasthas and vanaprashthas teach. Sannyasis travel and preach. Brahmacharis sit and study at the lotus feet of the spiritual masters. That's what they do. So the Vedic system is a perfect system, but we tend to always think that we know better than the Shastra, and also because we're not educated in the Shastra properly. So when you have a couple, or we have two couples who want to run a gurukul, the whole community should be behind them. They should be. They are producing leaders. They are producing children who are wholesome. But they're not appreciated. They are thought to be part of it. Those are cultural. Those laying down cultural basis. The sannyasi who's going out and preaching, and he is doing a great service for community, bringing people in, converting people to Krishna consciousness. But then they become families and they have to be educated. Then that is done locally, on the local level. But if the brahmacharis and the sannyasis involved in management, then they will be dealing with economic issues. And it is said here that they don't deal with any of these. This is not their concern. So if we had only created schools that were run properly, then we would not have the outpouring of heart of Chitra. Even small. Because why I'm saying Gurukul? Because Gurukuls tend to be small, they're family-based. Gurukuls are not huge schools. Just like we're here now. And if you want to dispense Krishna conscious education through large educational institutions, universities and colleges, it doesn't have much of a future. Those are research things. But even in the large colleges and universities and everything that was there in the Vedic culture, the heart of the institution was always a group of disciples studying under the Guru. Even it was Nalanda University. It was not like large forum of classes. No, it's always like, because transfer of values is done between a group of 5, 10, 20. Like this class, if this class goes over 25, I'll lose it. If I cannot see If I cannot see all my students on the screen, and all my students are not awake on the screen, at least, then I lose it. So that's why we survived, because I was a bit intense with all of you after my second class, because I had a reason to be. And we survived and we come so far. Otherwise, this class would have folded, because there was impersonalism had crept in. You know, we were just doing it for the sake of doing it. We didn't care about the teacher, whether we are half there, we are not half there. And I don't want this to creep back in, because this is the forum for study. Having 7, 8 students and studying together and sharing, it actually creates a richness that we will cherish for the rest of our life. This is the Gurukul system. I'm not saying typically, but typically a Gurukul system is like that. This is not typically because we're supposed to be sitting together under a tree and enjoying the fresh air and eating mangoes and discussing Krishna Katha. It'd be nice. But, so typically this is the system. So then the Brahmanas are valued, and the teachers are valued, and the culture is alive. So that's what we're talking about here in this text. So it's not outside the cultural. So, but generally when we'll talk about these things here, we will talk at it completely like sort of on an intellectual level, that the man has to behave such and such with the woman. And we'll talk about illicit sex in the context of just one way. But you see, Prabhupada is much more broad-minded. So the wife is protecting the husband. How is he protecting the husband? How? Because she is there, right? A man who possesses a good wife does not create a disturbance in society, but without a fixed wife, a man becomes a debauchee or the first order, unless he is trained. So what is a rigid system of training? At least whatever sense gratification he's having, it is the confines of his home with him and his wife, right? And this becomes a fort, and the sense gratification is contained within the 4 walls of the house, so to speak. Because Prabhupada talks about it in a roundabout way. Doesn't he say that when a man becomes he says, the family man has a responsibility to perform yajna. And he says that the wife is the better half because she protects him, right? And he tries not to accept the wife as a sense gratificatory agency, and vice versa. And this one point that DT accepts, using the pretense of wanting to have sons, and which is right, but at the wrong time, which means that she was not able to control her senses at the same time. And therefore, then they ended up having children who were demons, right? That because it was the wrong time. So that nothing to do with spiritual. Okay, everything is spiritual, but this is cultural education, right? This is culture.
Hare Krishna,
So,
Prabhu.
yes.
Yeah, when we touch these parts of our teachings, I somewhat feel saddened because looking at the development of Krishna consciousness globally, and especially to West Africa where we live, we'll see that things are the opposite of what they're supposed to be in terms of our development of culture of Krishna consciousness. And we can go on and explain or talk about what has happened. But my question is that one beautiful thing that I see happening now is that more and more devotees are getting aware of the philosophy. And to some degree, some are getting to read something. And I'm hoping that in the nearest future, it will create a kind of environment that will bring about what is expected. But the interim of this, I'm wondering what the
can be done, because it looks as if the set of those who are at the helms of affairs of ISKCON managerially are not those who are supposed to be there based on the Shastra. When we look at the Vedic,
I'm not sure I share this idea, because I'm looking at it a bit of higher picture.
Yeah,
when something doesn't work, I get your point. When something doesn't work, it's because these 5 principles are not being clearly implemented as a basis of our spiritual culture.
Exactly.
Which is, yeah. It's not because of, if the management is wrong, yes. The GBC is not doing well, yes.
My focus is not even the
Temple
management.
President is not right, yes. All this is coming because of these 5 principles not being implemented.
Absolutely. So my point here, I'm trying to make it, my point is not to point out to the management or to anyone. I'm talking in terms of general situation and how to reverse this situation. Because from what you have explained so far, based on Prabhupada's purport and the text we're reading, it's like things are not the way they're supposed to be. So how we bring it back, how we bring the focus back to this, because this is actually what will bring about what we all desire to see in Krishna consciousness. How we bring back this whole 5 aspects that we're talking about into place, because when there is, like you rightly said, when there is improper situation, it is not dependent on one angle. It's not just the temple president, it's not just the commander, it's not just the leadership, it's everything is clumsy, everything is together.
The foundational principles
exactly
are gone awry. The foundational principles are gone awry, which means that there's no emphasis on education, Bhagavatam.
Yeah.
There's no emphasis on proper deity worship. There's no emphasis on living in a saintly atmosphere.
Exactly.
There's no emphasis on good devotee relationship. And there is no emphasis on chanting the holy name properly. These are the 5 cultural bases. You see, when Lord Chaitanya, he talked to Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami, he actually didn't ask them to do anything. They wanted to go to Vrindavan, to Jagannath Puri and Mayapur. And he said, no, go to Vrindavan, sit there and write these books. And he told them, and he spent so many days educating. Those are very highly educated Brahmanas. They are from the Saraswat family. They are Karnataka Brahmanas, and they were generational Brahmanas, Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami. They were highly educated. Sanatana Goswami could actually talk to someone and figure out his mindset. And that's why the king Nawab Bhushan Shah did not want Sanatana Goswami to leave his employment, because he was such a powerful person. He could figure out things very quickly, easily. I remember when he was going and his servant had a gold coin with him, he easily figured out, just looking at his demeanor, he could easily figure out, you still have a gold coin with you, right? And he said, yes. Now, such an educated, such a highly educated person, Lord Chaitanya said, no, you will sit down and write these books for me. And he sat down with him in Varanasi and he educated Sanatana Goswami. In a Dashashrameda Ghat, he educated in the foundational principles of Krishna consciousness. And when he spoke about the foundational principles of Krishna consciousness, non-different than Srimad Bhagavatam, but he put it in a nutshell. And these 5 principles are the 5 principles that are important. So a yatra that neglects its Srimad Bhagavatam class will fail. If someone as an individual will carry on chanting his fixed number of rounds every day, but he will not associate nicely with devotees, or he will not hear Srimad Bhagavatam, sooner or later, he will become unsuccessful. He will meet, sooner or later, he will. And if someone is not properly taking darshan and offering food to the deities and serving the deities nicely at home, whether it is a picture of waking up and offering some arti and regularly, he will soon encounter difficulty. So these are the foundational principles are mostly neglected now in most yatras.
Exactly my point. So my point here is this, that these points are highlighted and understood based on what we're reading and what Prabhupada is saying. So what would be your, you said some two things that are very touching. You give an example of Chopati and how they grew up to be what they are, and that we have the Amarendra, we have the Chaitanya, we have so many of them, all spread across the globe that are doing some wonderful preaching. So because of what the word we were brought, and we already know these challenges, we know the problem, where this is coming from. But how do we reverse the situation? At least it has to start from somewhere. What
We
would
have
be
to,
your...
I don't have the answer for this. That's why I don't know. But I know what has to be done. But how it is to be implemented, what has to be done, I know. How, that's for the managers to decide.
Exactly my... Now you come back to that.
But they have to know. But if they are, if they're listening to the Brahminical class, to the educated group of devotees, they can implement them. But and it has to be done. It has to be done. And I think that's going to save our movement from embarrassing situations, and we can establish a proper culture, because culture is a protection of the devotees. We have to grow in a proper culture. You know, I've suffered because of that, because my children also have been completely, you know, turned upside down, because being brought up a certain way, you can't relate to other ways. But then they go to school and they've asked to fend for themselves economically and work in the environment of the West or whatever secular society. So yes, we don't have economic basis yet. So the education is a key.
Yeah.
The education is a key. And I think we have to educate and create educational units, small, and then wholesome and small. And then if you have an educational unit, no matter how bad it is doing, we have to support it, refine it, frame it, reframe it, restructure it till it becomes perfect.
Thank you.
It's a gradual process.
It's painful for someone like me, because you know, I had this good fortune when I came into the movement. I'm talking about 1990s, 91, 92, when we stopped Bhakti Training College in my location. And one of the reasons I suffered so much was because I was emphasizing that an institution that stopped training is already a dead institution. And I suffered a whole lot of, because I started the movement by having to informally study the Bhagavad Gita based on what I have said. And today I'm doing Bhakti Vaibhav, but Bhakti Vaibhav, I got the module for Bhakti Vaibhav in 1992, and I started studying based on the, which is there informally, because there was no regular school and I couldn't afford to go to India. So I saw some of these things, but it's like I wasn't having the potency, maybe probably, or empowerment to be able to enforce what is required to be done, because some of these things, it's painful to me as a person, because I seem to see some of
anyway,
these things,
we do want to keep to this discussion. I will have to stop, Sarika Prabhu.
Yeah,
not being that great. But actually these are cultural things.
Yeah.
And we have to keep talking about culture of Krishna consciousness. I think that's the way to go about, is a culture of Krishna consciousness.
Thank you.
What culture of Krishna consciousness? The word to use, the buzzword is culture. What culture of Krishna consciousness we are spreading? What culture? Not practice and principles of Krishna consciousness. What is a culture in which Krishna consciousness will grow? There's two things is required: the spiritual ethics and the culture. The culture is the support base of the spiritual ethics. So because we don't have a culture, then how are our children going to be educated? How are the women going to be trained? And it is for cultural revolution. So we went, and then we took a wrong turn. And if the temples should not be a congregation place only for, it will become like a Sunday temple if you don't have brahmacharis training. So the deity worship is there, the association is there. And if the strong Bhagavatam study becomes there, and they go out on Harinam and they do Harinam nicely, right? And they are taught to associate nicely, then the 5 principles, at least in this microcosm of the unit of Krishna consciousness, will be flourishing. And from there, it will expand. So if this is not protected, how will it expand from there? So if you have brahmacharis,
Absolutely.
you train them properly and don't send them out to collect money. You know, teach them properly, train them properly, 10, 15 years, good training, good shastra, good chanting, make sure they're following rules of celibacy. Then you will have some strong leaders. And we've seen a good bout of strong leaders come out. And we were also we were also product of those same strong systems. Even though we were not trained to be preachers and teachers, we were trained to be collectors and this and that. But at least on the side, we had those things. So we have to create strong units of brahmachari ashram. And then for the families who have children, we have to create schools. This is the way to go about.
Thank you very much.
I think like that, but maybe others differ. Others think
I
otherwise.
also think the way you think. I absolutely think the way you think, Prabhu. And I hope and I pray that it's just that the challenge I personally have is that I wish I can find a way to make this a standard, but it's actually not in my.
Yeah, it will take a little while.
It must
Maybe
be a
some
gradual
places.
process. Must be a gradual process. Whatever must be a gradual process. We are evolving. And we have to start. We have to start from somewhere.
Maybe not in our lifetimes.
We are evolving.
Krishna will come. Right now, we are being saved by Lord Krishna's manifesting as the internet, and we're able to talk.
Yes.
Jai Hare Krishna. So let us loudly all
Innovator.
chant a loud Hare Krishna Maha Mantra to appreciate Prabhu for this wonderful section of the 11th unit of Bhakti Vaibhav, chapter 14. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Hare Ram. Vancha karpata rubhyascha kripa sindhubhyascha patitanam bhavasya